La podcast with T and Mo. Welcome to the Parking Law podcast with T
And Mo.
and this episode, which is episode 3, we are going to talk about the Disaster Artist.
Yes, the famous, the movie about the famous and more like infamous film, The Room. So The Room was a independent movie made in 2003, written, directed, and starring and produced by Tommy Wiseau, and starring him and his best friend Greg Sestero. So this was like horrible movie, and it got famous for becoming known as the worst movie ever made. And then James Franco and company decided they're going to do their little love letter to that movie by talking about the story that happened behind the scenes, how Tommy and Greg got together and decided to make The Room.
Yeah. And I have to say, I enjoyed it. There were some parts that were very cringe-worthy.
Some parts?
Yeah. Well, okay. Most parts.
Was there any part that wasn't cringeworthy?
It's just James Franco played a very good role as Tommy Wiseau. I believed it.
Oh yeah.
And he was in character, like super in character. Like I heard from some of the YouTube interviews that he had that even when he directed, he was in character as Tommy Wiseau, which is crazy. But he was like, "Oh, why do I have to go back and forth where I can just stay in as the character?" And if you haven't heard the character, his voice is super weird, and the actor himself is super weird.
Tommy Wiseau, yes.
Yeah, and his character, his voice sounds European, and from the YouTube interviews that I saw, it sounds exactly like a European accent, but he keeps saying that it's New Orleans, so it's kind of weird. And he's like a very secretive guy. He says like in The Disaster Artist, he was 20 when he shot it, where he literally looks like he's a 40-year-old. He looks so old. Yeah.
No, he's a mystery, and he plays it up. I think they have midnight showings of this movie in independent theaters. A lot of in major cities in the United States, like I know New York and LA definitely do it, and a bunch of hip, cool indie film theaters. They have midnight showings where people come, and often Tommy Wiseau himself comes in the ones in LA, and he does a question and answer. And I think they always ask him. They always ask him the same questions: how old is he? Where is he from? And where did he get his money? And he never answers any of those questions. And there's nowhere on the internet where you can find any answers to those things.
Yeah, and I really want to know, because some places that I like listen to, there was like, he made his money from selling jeans. I'm like, man.
Oh, so some people have theories, yeah.
Yeah, like James Franco said that when he asked him, then he would reply that he made his money from selling jeans, like Levi jeans. And I'm like, man, if you sold that much, like it's a $6 million movie. If you want to know about flops, this movie was the biggest flop. It took $6 million.
Go ahead.
It took $6 million to make, and then the return was $1,800. Like, movie.
But that's the theatrical run. He only kept it in theaters for 2 weeks to qualify for the Oscars. But in the movie they have that big billboard that he gets.
Yeah.
That famous billboard with that picture of him looking like Dracula.
Yeah.
He loved that picture of himself. He paid for that giant billboard to be there for years. And it became like an attraction. People go to LA. It's one of the landmarks. It's one of the the sites that people go and check out, and that actually helped promote it so much that on DVDs and merchandise, he's made a killing. He's made tons of money.
Yeah.
So I think a theatrical run, obviously, giant flop.
Yeah, if you compare it to flops now, like, certain movies, Blade Runner was considered a flop. Like, it did really, really well, but it lost money. And a lot of movies are losing money now and not returning the amount. But this is like $6 million, and he probably did not make that much money back from like DVD sales now, and he might now because of the Disaster Artist came out and how good it was. People are probably going to buy the movie, but I don't know how much it's gonna make. Do you think it's gonna make over $6 million?
The Disaster Artist, or
no? The Room. Because people are gonna buy The Room, right? After
I think
watching that.
I think its original theatrical run is done. Like, I don't think they count all the little indie viewings of this as part of the box office.
Even the DVD sales?
But DVD sales were never part of the box office.
Oh. Like,
that's a totally different number. Yeah. And I know studios don't have to release those numbers. And Tommy Wiseau's never going to release those numbers. But I'm pretty sure he's totally fine. He's making lots of money. I think they're still acting. I think him and Greg Sestero, his friend, I think they starred in a couple of movies together.
But moving on, with Greg and Tommy Wiseau, which the people who played it was James Franco and his brother.
His brother Dave Franco.
Dave Franco, yeah.
No matter how good, like, James Franco was like really, really good as Tommy Wiseau. Dave Franco not very good as Greg Sestero. Like, very unconvincing. He did a good job. Like, I think I enjoyed him in the movie, but it's completely. He looks completely different. He sounds completely different. That beard they put on him looked so terrible. So it was a sharp contrast.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up because that was one of the things I was going to talk about, because the beard looked disgusting. It literally looked like those stalkers, and then they tried to configure their face, so then they put on that fake beard. It looked like that. It looked really fake. And you keep looking at it and you're like, nah,
it's distracting.
It's not getting better.
Yeah. But wow. So the movie apparently is very different from what happened in real life, and it's very different from what was in the actual book, The Disaster Artist, which it's based off of, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of the Disaster Artist movie was a lot more uplifting and positive. It paints Tommy Wiseau in a better light, which is kind of funny because when I watched the movie without knowing a lot of the backstory from the book, I really thought that Tommy Wiseau, the character in the movie, didn't have any redemptive arc. Like, they paint him as like some sort of, nice guy, but he gets really angry and gets really jealous. He's kind of weird, and he does some kind of bad things, especially to Greg. And then he doesn't learn anything. It's basically Greg who has to come back and become the bigger man. And then it ends off on a positive note. I'm like, huh. So Tommy Wiseau didn't learn anything. The end of the movie seemed like very positive. Like, in the first screening, Tommy Wiseau realized that people love his movie. And I don't know. It was it was very strange. What did you think?
Yeah, it was the same too. Because, like, listening to some of the interviews, they were saying that not a lot of people came out. And a lot of people were like, man, this is weird. It didn't become like kind of like a cult following until like a little later, like a couple years later.
Oh yeah, and not just that, but it ruined the careers of the people in that movie. Like, they were not happy to be in that movie. It was I don't think it was a happy ending at all at that point. It took a very long time for it to come around and them to kind of celebrate whatever success they had as a bad movie. But
Yeah.
in the movie, in the middle of the viewing, Tommy Wiseau turns around and he's all like, yeah, I intended this to be a funny movie.
Yeah, James Franco actually said that he changed how he thought about the movie,
Yeah.
and he just switched the flip, as he said, because it was so bad, and then it became a cult following. He's like, "Oh, I intended it to be a comedy. I made it like that," which he initially didn't. So he
No.
was saying that when he was trying to get information on it, he couldn't
Yeah.
talk to Tommy Russo about it because Tommy Russo was,
Because the guy would lie.
yeah, he lied about it. That's it. Like, he already changed what he thought about it. So at that point, you can't really get a lot of information from that. Thankfully, they got some audio recordings of his voice, and he stole those like from Tommy Russo, and then before he like it became a cult, and then he gave it to James Franco, and James Franco has like a couple recordings of Tommy Russo of like how he was kind of like before The Room, and it's really funny to listen to too.
Oh, I haven't heard those.
Yeah, they're given if you listen to what he says in Disaster Artist is exactly portrayed. You know, where he's like, oh, trying to find goes to Hollywood and he tries to find like an acting job and he can't because he looks like a doesn't act really well and he looks like a vampire. Like
Yeah.
that was in there.
But there's a few things that they changed. Like in Greg's book, I don't think he wasn't supposed to be in The Room at first. He had no interest to star in the movie, and he didn't do it like as a favor. He did it basically as a job. Like he needed money, and I think he was only supposed to be like a script supervisor or a line reader, and then Tommy really wanted him in the movie, so he kind of like tricked him or kind of convinced him to take on the role. And there's a lot of like nasty stuff that would go on behind the scenes, like they constantly changing crews, they're firing people, not paying everybody. Like it was not as hopeful, not as like charmingly funny,
Yeah.
and I think it was a bit more sad.
Yeah, and he also recorded like most of those videos. Like in the Disaster Artist, he gives like a camera to a guy, and
documentary crew, yeah.
his main job is to document the filming, and
Yeah.
the guy documented like everything: cars pulling into parking lot, unrolling a film. But then he also caught like a lot of people talking bad about Tommy Russo and stuff like that.
Yep.
So
There's a lot of truth in the movie. I'm
Yeah.
not saying they took too many liberties. Did kind of soften it. They did make Tommy, and I guess maybe because Tommy had to sign off on the final script. I'm sure he had some sort of deal worked out with them. So it's funny that it's not so much like here is the behind the scenes look, like a dramatized behind the scenes look of the real thing. It's more like this is a fan film for this guy that we love, and we love his bad movie, and we kind of like they did it for him. Like
yeah,
Tommy's character never really has to admit anything wrong. Everything works out really good. Because like does the movie because they're best friends. Like it seemed like Dave Franco did this for Tommy,
yeah,
as opposed to wanting to make like the real behind the scenes story.
yeah. And
Which is fine. I don't think like not every if it's based on a real story doesn't mean they have to be like exactly the truth, because the truth is not always format. But
Yeah.
it's very funny to see it that shaped this way.
And for me, it was weird to also see, but funny to see someone like really well-known actors in the movie play really bad actors. And it was kind of weird because I'm like, did they actually do this in the movie? Because if to me, watching it was like watching Power Rangers, but worse. Like, Power Rangers, like the first season, it is bad. It's cringeworthy. But this was worse. From like The Room, not Disaster Artist. Disaster Artist is a beautiful movie, but the movie that it's portrayed on, the acting is just wow. It's so, I just can't believe that it's
that
in
exists.
there. You know that this was released first off.
Oh, but I mean, do you watch a lot of bad movies? Like, do you know it's like a huge subculture of watching and commenting and actually loving bad movies?
I haven't watched a lot of bad movies. Well, I've watched a few, but not this bad.
Oh, there's a huge subculture around it, and there's a lot of podcasts and YouTubes and blogs that are just dedicated to talking about how bad these bad movies are, and just like genuinely loving them. Like there's a movie called Birdemic. Have you heard that one?
No.
Oh my God, Birdemic is fantastic. It's so amateur. Like, at least Tommy Wiseau's film had a theatrical release, and it was done by a competent crew. Like, he got real filmmakers to make his ridiculous vision. Birdemic was like amateur hour from beginning to end. So there are a lot of these really bad movies. So it makes more sense when you realize how many bad movies there are actually out there. Ever heard of Red Letter Media on YouTube?
No.
What? Red Letter Media, they're like the OGs of like bad movies and that kind of stuff. Like they do the series called The Best of the Worst, where fans send them VHSs of really old bad movies and infomercials, and not infomercials, but like instructional videos, and they watch them and they review them and they make fun of them, and it's pretty hilarious. And they've been doing it for a very long time.
Yeah. So now let's move on to talking about The Room itself and why.
Yeah. So you haven't seen The Room, right?
Yeah.
So tell me, what do you think The Room is about?
Okay. So what I think this movie is about is a person in a room, like The Cell, right? No. No. I think this movie is about a person, like a group of people in a room, and he got cheated on by his friend, and then gets very depressed, and then kills himself. Is that the gist?
Yeah. You know what? That's as succinct a summary as I could imagine. But yeah, it's very much like that. But it's funny because in this movie, Tommy Wiseau's character is like the coolest, nicest, most well-adjusted, kind, generous person, and he has like this perfect life, and he's got this girlfriend, and she's really ungrateful, and she's like, she's very flippant. She keeps changing her mind all the time. There's a bunch of like random secondary characters who like plot points come up and then never like are mentioned and never come up again. Like in the movie, in Disaster Artist, remember they talked about her having cancer?
Yeah.
Yeah, that never comes up again in the movie.
It just pops up.
Yeah, and remember the guy who says, "How old's my character supposed to be?"
Yeah.
That guy. Okay, so the real actor has like this incredibly creepy look about him. I would suggest you go and check out just the clips with that actor, because it's so creepy, and he's like joining them in the bed, and he's like a full-grown adult, and it
I know. I actually saw that, and one of the scenes that I thought was funny was when he's like crying to, well, what's the relation there? The sister or
the lady, the blonde lady.
yeah,
Uh,
the
the
relation
is
to the
it
kid.
crying? or Tommy's character?
No, the kid was crying.
He was crying because he owed someone money for drugs,
Yeah.
and the drug dealer tried to get it from him, and I forgot the exact details of that. They play catch. Before the wedding. They play catch in tuxedos before the wedding. There's so much really weird stuff. I know there's a character that shows up in the third act, and he wasn't there anywhere in the movie, and he's supposed to be a close friend of theirs. And I'm like, I've never seen this guy before. The movie's baffling. The Room is the kind of movie where you shouldn't watch on your own. You have to watch with a group of friends and laugh at it and point things out and you know why they throw spoons on the screen, right?
Why?
In the midnight showings, because all the artwork in the movie in the apartment is all spoons. So it's just like framed pictures of spoons. Spoons is artwork. It's just this weird motif that they have all over the place.
What?
Yeah.
What?
There's so many things in the background. There's so many classic lines. There's and he commits suicide at the end.
Yeah.
Right? That scene is wow. No, the Room is a fantastic movie, but again, you got to watch it with the group. You can't watch it on your own. It's not any fun on your own, and it's just you think about it after you watch it, and you're like, how could this be? Especially if you're not used to bad movies.
Yeah.
If you're used to bad movies, then it's not technically the worst because they had some professionals behind it, but it's hilarious.
Yeah, and in the movie, there was that line that kid said. He's like, I bought drugs off of him. And then they were like, how can you do drugs? And he's like, it's not like that. I just needed money. And I'm like, so you bought drugs to resell drugs? Like, what are you doing here? Like, that story point just didn't make sense.
So let me ask you, what would you give The Disaster Artist? What is your score for that movie?
I'd say a 3 out of 5. It was good. I liked it, but given I should have watched The Room before I watched this, but it wasn't the best movie I've seen. It was really funny. I laughed and it was enjoyable, but
But you felt you missed out, like it was like an inside joke that you didn't fully get, right? Because you haven't seen The Room.
yeah. Because like watching it, and I'm like, why are they acting like this? But I've watched clips of The Room, and it makes sense why they did, because the guy was a bad actor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just, if you watch that, you would understand, and you understand some of the scenes, because in Disaster Artist, it only shows snippets, like really small snippets
clips
of the
room.
Some really funny parts,
Yeah.
but not enough that you could sit through and know everything. Like, I know the gist of what The Room is, but I missed out on a lot of like the dialogue and the interactions between the characters, right?
Okay. Well, I would have a similar reaction. I'd say 3 out of 5, but it's kind of hard for me to rank this movie. I'd say if you haven't seen The Room, it'll just be like a interesting, quirky movie. But if you've seen The Room, or if you're looking for someone to make a Tommy Wiseau impression for a feature length runtime, this would be a movie for you. Like that's who enjoys it. My little brother, he watched it with me, and he said all I wanted was James Franco to act like Tommy Wiseau for like an hour and a half or 2 hours, however long it is. He's like, and I got that. So that's who I'd recommend it for. People who want to see that.
Yeah, and it was great.
Right on.
It was more like, I would say this movie feels like more like a documentary more than an actual.
No, I wouldn't say documentary. It's too much of a love letter to Tommy Wiseau. It's too stylized. It's too like Hollywoodized. I would not use that word at all.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's just me.
Yeah. Did you watch the B after credit scene?
Oh, actually, no, I didn't know there was an after credit scene.
Yeah, it's Tommy Russo comes in and starts talking to James Franco in character.
Oh,
So the Tommy Russo's talking to real life Tommy Russo, and the interaction's hilarious. And it's like, man, that accent is very familiar. And he's like, I'm from New Orleans, you know?
see, that's the ultimate example. That encapsulates this whole movie. He's like, I'm gonna make an impression of you because I love you.
Yeah. Okay.
It's pretty fitting.
It is. It is very fitting for this movie, and I laughed when I saw it. And you can probably pull it up on YouTube after this, because it's a 2 minute clip, but it's worth it. So
Hmm.
let's move on to a new segment that we have, and it's called Tickle My Fancy. So this segment's about anything that is coming up and is tickling our fancy that we want to go watch, or it just tickles our fancy because it just makes us angry. Okay? So, Mo, what tickles your fancy?
Well, I guess since we're extending the description of tickle your fancy, which, by the way, I just want everyone to know that's listening to this, I don't approve any of these theme songs, any of these segment titles, uh, but I am enjoying myself. But that, anyway, so what tickled what's my fancy this week um, is they just announced the other day that they're pushing forward the New Mutants movie, the Fox's New Mutants movie, and the Fox X-Men Dark Phoenix movie. And I thought that was so hilarious because not necessarily for the New Mutants, because New Mutants I think might be good. I saw the teaser trailer; it wasn't a particularly good teaser trailer, but it was all right. Like it could work out. I know they're heavily reshooting that movie, adding more characters and whatnot, but who knows? It's got a lot of potential.
It
Now,
didn't. I watched the trailer and it literally did not feel at all like a movie. It felt like a TV movie because the trailer wasn't that great at all.
not effects
Like,
real,
yeah,
like an act reel.
that's what I felt it was like, because it just didn't feel that great at all.
No, and I agree. It was not. Um, wasn't impressive, but at the same time, it showed us so little that I'm like, you know what? I still have hope that this will be really good. Like, I like the New Mutants in the. Have you ever read the New Mutant comics?
Yes.
And they're a lot of fun, right?
Yeah, that it's like different characters, and it's very interesting to watch. And it has
Yeah.
some good characters too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And they would like genre hop, so they would do like horror, then they do like funny stuff, then they do like space stuff. Like they team up with the Power Pack. Like they were very flexible and super melodramatic, and actually way darker than the X-Men sometimes, the regular X-Men. So if they're going to experiment with another one of these X-Men franchises, New Mutants sounds like a good place to start.
But for me, Dark Phoenix Saga.
Saga, listen, don't scare me. Don't try to threaten me by telling me it's going to be more than one movie. Okay.
Dark Phoenix is a really good comic series. I liked
Oh,
it.
yeah.
I really
Classic.
enjoyed it.
It's
X-Men
probably the
with,
number one. It's probably the number one most famous X-Men arc.
yeah.
And we know they attempted it before with X-Men 3. That was a garbage fire, and uh, and this movie, X-Men Dark Phoenix. Now, I don't always like to be too negative on movies that are coming up, right? Because you can always get surprised. You can always get surprised. You thought, oh, I didn't like this actor in this other movie, and then you see them in this new movie, and all of a sudden they're fantastic, right?
Yeah.
Directors can surprise you. Studios can surprise you, right? You think like, oh, Sony can't do a good movie, and then they pull off a Homecoming, even though Marvel had a lot of influence. Like there's a lot of potential. Yeah, most movies have. Now, Dark Phoenix, for me, has killed a lot of its potential just by who they put behind the wheel, the direction they're going in, and just like strange decisions they've made. So this movie is going to be it's the directorial debut of Simon Kinberg. So Simon Kinberg is a pretty, like, I would say, prolific producer over at Fox. So he has produced a lot of big movies. Almost everything involved with the X-Men, he's had his finger in, right? If you go to his IMDb and look at as a producer, basically everything with X-Men involved is on there. And including Apocalypse, including X-Men First Class, and including as a writer. Let me pull this up right here. As a writer, he did. He worked on Star Wars Rebels. He wrote X-Men Apocalypse, Days of Future Past, and X-Men: The Last Stand. So he wrote X-Men: The Last Stand, the third one.
Ugh.
Right? So this guy's name is attached to really good things and really bad things. But he's made it very clear, because he's the producer, he's made it very clear that he thinks that the X-Men franchise hinges on the trinity of Jennifer Lawrence, James McAvoy, and Michael Fassbender. He's like, this is the trinity of his X-Men. What the hell does Magneto and Professor X have to do with the Dark Phoenix saga?
Yeah, they weren't really.
Especially Magneto.
Yeah.
Especially
Magneto
right?
wasn't even in the saga. It was.
He wasn't.
Yeah.
He wasn't. And they had to be like well-established relationships. Like Jean and Scott have to be very well established. The X-Men, as they are, have to be very well established. Like the new team that they teased at the end of the last. Don't get me started on X-Men Apocalypse. So I'm going in this movie knowing that I hated X-Men Apocalypse. I hated what they did with the franchise. It started actually pretty good when they rebooted it and they did X-Men First Class.
Yeah.
And then Simon Kinberg gets involved and he runs it into the freaking ground. And now they're letting him write and direct and produce. Actually, I don't know if he's writing, but he's definitely directing and producing. And I listened to an interview by him on the Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith, an excellent podcast about screenwriting. And he was on there talking about Apocalypse. And he said in the future scripts that he's going to write, that he's going to work on, he really wants to focus on those three. And even the actors, Jennifer Lawrence, do you remember when she made that deal with James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender, that if all three of them don't come back, none of them are coming back?
Yeah.
Right? It's garbage like that. Jennifer Lawrence, not only is her character completely irrelevant in the story, but she gave up acting in these movies after the first one.
Yeah.
Right?
I didn't really enjoy her in the third one. Like this the first and the second one were good.
Mm-hmm.
But the third one, like, I really didn't like her character, and they keep trying to rope her in into these stories where she isn't in the comics, and then they bring her in and make her kind of like a bigger character, and I'm not really a fan of that.
And don't get me wrong, they shouldn't put her in, like, they shouldn't just follow the comics, all right?
Yeah.
The comics are not perfect. And there's a lot of good improvements that they can make in these movies. But the problem is, her character has no purpose. Her character has no purpose, and she's not interesting. And it takes away, like, if you have these three big actors in there, who are the tent poles of this franchise, but then the story is about Jean Grey and Scott and the Hellfire Club. Like, how are you gonna have time to give screen time to these three big actors and then all these other actors and hit on all these story points, and you have to establish all the relationships and all the dynamics and the team that you didn't do in the previous movie? Like, it seems impossible. It seems impossible to do well. And on top of that, they decided that all the publicity and all the marketing and all the stuff they said about this, they're saying, we want this movie to be less galactic. But the Shi'ar are involved in this. Like, they have the first time the X-Men are being introduced to the aliens. First time they're being introduced to the aliens, and they're like, we don't want this movie to be very galactic.
Well, they're as galactic as they can be. The only thing more galactic than that is Galactus.
Oh, and they cast Jessica Chastain as the primary villain. And I don't know, a lot of people love her, but I am not a fan of Jessica Chastain. And again, so actors can surprise me. You know, a bad franchise can all of a sudden get much better, like Logan. Like the Wolverine movies weren't that good, and then all of a sudden Logan's fantastic. But I think the cards are really stacked against this movie, with everything that came before it, what all the actors did, what the characters in the story didn't do or did do, what they say the direction is going to be, and the casting of new characters. This whole movie looks like a dumpster fire that is like... I'll be surprised if it came out. Like, actually, I would be surprised if both this and New Mutants doesn't end up on the new Disney streaming service when Disney finally finishes buying Fox. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, maybe they're being delayed because they're not actually gonna come out in theaters.
Maybe because it's just not good. Maybe they did, because like most movies now, they do like a pre-screening. For example, what was the movie? Rampage and Skyscraper. Those both with Dwayne Johnson. Both those movies had an early screening, right? And
Test screening.
Deadpool also had an early screening and
Test screening, yeah.
Yeah. And they were able to fix some things, but maybe they did that and they're like, this is actually really bad. Let's stop it, because I just don't feel now that Marvel has all these good movies and then Fox is going to release these two really bad movies. I don't think Marvel will allow that. So I feel them pushing it back might be a good thing, because either it will become really good or it will just never come out, because I don't think Marvel is going to be wanting a really shittier movie to come out when they've been on this really good track record with really good movies, right? Like Black Panther, Thor, and possibly Avengers when it comes out.
Yeah.
So I just don't feel that they're gonna be like, yeah, let's release it. And
they don't want this turd on their roster, right?
They already got a turd, and that turd was Apocalypse. And I don't think they want more of a turd on top of that.
Oh, buddy, Fox has more than one turd on their on their slate. But you know what? You mentioned about reshoots. I don't mind reshoots. Reshoots can make a movie better, right? Yeah. And they're kind of normal for a lot of these movies. So I'm not too worried about reshoots. I'm worried about everything else. And again, I would love this movie to come out and to be fantastic. I just seriously doubt it. Doubt it. And it's sad because I love the X-Men. The X-Men are really, really good, and they're like consistently screwing them over. Consistently.
It's the same
But
as
anyway,
Fantastic
that,
Four, right?
well,
Fantastic
actually,
Four
no,
stick.
I don't even care about the Fantastic Four that much. Plus, we got an Incredibles movie, so we got a good Fantastic Four movie anyway. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on these new Fox movies. What tickles your fancy?
What tickles my fancy? A lot of things tickle my fancy,
You don't
but
say.
man, I really need to change the segment name. But what tickles my fancy is dark crimes
Mm,
and uh, kind of like an indie crime thriller from um, Jim Carrey.
yes.
So I'm kind of excited for that because I always like really serious roles when it comes to comedians. They've
Wait, this movie came out already, right?
yeah, it has came out, but apparently it's going to be re-released or something like that. So I'm kind
Okay,
of
okay.
excited to watch it because I haven't seen it. I've seen
Hmm.
the trailer of it, and it just looks interesting so far.
Okay, okay.
And another one would be Deadpool. I kind of want
Oh,
to see where Deadpool's going to be because they have some really interesting characters in there that I want to see, like Domino,
yes.
and it looks funny, and I just want to see where they're gonna go from the first one. If it's gonna be better or kind of meh, because the trailer that they had, I wasn't really a fan of. It it
The
was
first or second?
funny. No, the second one.
Okay, I haven't seen the second one. It wasn't good.
No, like this. I mean, the first trailer, yeah, like the one where he's like goes into the
No
booth and
spoilers.
changes into Deadpool.
Oh,
That
oh,
one,
the Superman teaser from a long time ago. Yeah.
yeah, I wasn't really a
You didn't
fan of
like that
that.
one?
No, it
Oh,
it was funny, but it was just like it was kind
but
of
that's
like over the top.
but that's not going to be in the movie though.
Nah,
No, that was just like a promotional thing. So
yeah,
like
and I
a
wonder if they're with cable, if they're ever gonna do the actual story with Summer's kid.
they don't
Do
have
you think
time for
they'll
that.
do that?
Like no, they don't have time for that.
But it would
They may
be
do it as a they may say it all as a joke, but they don't like the comics have years and years and years of continuity, and they have issue. They have multiple issues about the same, sometimes about the same event happening every month. Every month, so they have a lot of time, a lot of space in which to tell these giant interconnected stories. But in the movies, they're gonna spoiler alert for anybody who doesn't know anything about cable's history, but they're not gonna have uh, Jean Grey dying and then Scott marrying a clone of Jean Grey, having a baby, and then having that baby being infected with the apocalypse virus, and then being sent to the future and being raised in this dark future, and then come back and then lead the X Force team, and like that. That's not going to happen in this one Deadpool movie.
yeah. I think
I mean, that'd be cool. I would love that, but I think it would be a little confusing for people who haven't read the comics or know the story. It'd be like, what the hell's going on?
yeah, and I'm kind of iffy right now on Venom.
Oh,
What do you think?
Venom.
Yeah,
We didn't talk about Venom last time, did we?
no, we did not.
Oh, so that's like the best commentary I heard on that is someone said, "Oh, the trailer they released for Venom about the footage they just finished filming yesterday, like, like it looks like they didn't get a chance to really do any post editing,
Yeah,
any post production on that footage. They just slapped it together, and they're like, here's a teaser trailer."
I think all you see is the symbiote in the tube moving. That's
Yeah.
all you see. You don't really see him as Venom or anything
No.
like that, which I
No.
want. But
There's rumors that he won't be in the Venom suit till the very end and for a very short time. But that could be a lie. I think Tom Hardy himself is trying to squash those rumors, but who knows? Who knows? It could be like oh, speaking of, I know I said I'd stop talking about X-Men, but X-Men Apocalypse, when they did all the promotional material and they showed the new X-Men team with Jean, Scott, Kurt, all of the older team in the comics, in their costumes, and even Mystique was in a version of her costume, and it was in the trailer, and I'm like, yes, and they show the Blackbird and they show all the stuff, and then in the movie, it's the final scene of the movie.
Yeah.
They don't ever go on a mission. I was like, what garbage is, and they blow up the Blackbird before it even gets a chance to leave. Like, it was the most anticlimactic garbage I've ever seen. Anyway, enough about X-Men, but yeah. They might do the thing where Venom only gets his costume at the very end of the movie.
And I'll be very happy too if in this Venom movie they have Tobey Maguire starting to, he's dancing down the street and does that stupid dance that he does. Do you think they'll add that into the Venom movie?
Tobey Maguire?
Yeah.
Or Tom Holland?
Tobey Maguire. When he does that crazy dance down the street?
No way at all. That's impossible.
I would laugh if they just did that because that ruined that movie.
I don't think this movie is going to be the comedic type. Not from that trailer we saw.
Okay, guys. Thank you for listening to episode 3.
Mm-hmm.
And we have some very interesting things coming down the docket that we're going to try to add. Different intros, different guest speakers. And some of the things that are coming up are really interesting. So if you enjoyed last episode, this episode, keep listening because we'll try to keep getting better and add new things.
Can't wait for that.
Okay, and I'll see you guys next episode.
See you guys.